Hi, everybody. This is Ann Patchett at Parnassus Books. Thank you for listening to Parnassus Presents. Your support allows us to keep bringing you fantastic events. So please consider purchasing a copy of tonight's featured book at the link below. We hope you enjoy the event, recorded live from the Parnassus stage.
I'm Elise, and I am the Director of Events here at Parnassus. So my biggest fan, on behalf of Ann Patchett and everybody here at the store, I want to say thank you for being here. And thank you, and thank all of you for being here. And I just want to say that Ann and myself, everybody who's read this book already, and we love it so much. It's our first editions selection, so that's our subscription. And I also, if you don't know about our First Editions Club, you should check it out online. It's really a lovely subscription, and we have close to 1,700 people around the country that subscribe to this, and you get signed first editions, and it's curated, and Ann always selects, and so we know it's going to be great, as this book is, and I really encourage you to buy one for yourself and for your best friends too. So Kathy, just a few things. She's the author of Family Trust, Imposter Syndrome, and now, of course, the fabulous Satisfaction Café, again, which we selected for our First Editions Club. And she's a graduate of UC Berkeley and also of Harvard Business School. She's no slouch. And she is in conversation tonight with our own fabulous Lindsay Lynch, who is an author, and she also happens to be the book buyer here, and we love her very much. We love them both, and so will you. Help me welcome Kathy Wang and Lindsay Lynch.
Hi.
Hello, Kathy.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. I understand that you want to kick us off with reading. Wait, you have something you want to read first?
Yes.
Okay.
So I don't usually do readings, so I'm not doing one today either, just because I'm awkward and it gets even worse than a reading. So I usually do a speech. So I wrote one here, and then this morning I had a conversation with Ann, and then I actually went back and wrote a different speech and then printed it out at my hotel's business center. So this is a different one. So thank you, Ann, for the new speech.
I love that you're a person who uses the hotel business center.
I did. But I've never used it before, so
Incredible.
I was like, it's time for me to use it. So I was very excited. So thank you for having me here. So I had a quick conversation with Ann today where I told her a little bit about how I wrote this book. And so I decided that I wanted to share with all of you the story of how I wrote this book today. And in order to share that, I actually have to share a little bit about my writing career and also about the business of writing a book. So my first book is called Family Trust, and it came out in 2017. Your first book, or rather, your first novel, is typically called your debut. And in contrast with other industries where what you earn kind of goes up over time as you have more experience, a lot of the times your debut is the most money you ever get as an author. You have no kind of sales record, which means publishers actually really like that because all they see is potential and they can kind of imagine you as the next big thing, if that's what they want. So in 2017, I wrote my book. I found an agent through the slush pile, and then that agent took it on submission to publishers. Multiple houses ended up being interested, and it went to auction. We ended up signing with HarperCollins, and it actually received a very small mention in the New York Times that year as one of the larger debut deals of kind of the season. Mine was actually a 2-book deal from Harper, which means that they agreed to pay me a certain amount for each of 2 books that I would write for them. Those 2 books were Family Trust, which came out in 2018, and then Imposter Syndrome, which came out in 2021. Okay, so then that's the happy part of the story. And now I'm going to move on to the next part. So the next part of the story is the part which I'm not really ever supposed to say out loud, even though I would say it does happen, I think, to a lot of these kind of larger debut book deals, which is that my 2 books did not sell to expectations. You're not supposed to say that out loud, I think, because people associate it with failure, and which it of course is in a way. And I first wanted to say it was Americans, but actually I think it's everyone around the world, including myself, who is allergic to failure. it's kind of like saying you didn't get the job that you applied for, or you didn't get into the school you wanted, or someone that you loved didn't love you back. And I think it's pretty easy in many ways to kind of fake it on the book side. If I'm gonna be honest, in certain ways, my book still did pretty well. It was like a Costco pick or book of the month, et cetera, et cetera. But there were just, really pretty high expectations set because of the size of my deal. And to be quite frank, it just did not meet those. So I wanna be honest here and share that because it's part of my story, and one which I think understandably a lot of people don't share about the publishing industry and the journey. So after my 2 books were published, I was no longer under contract with HarperCollins. I knew that I wanted to keep writing books though, so I had a really frank conversation with my agent. And I said, how am I ever gonna get published again? Is it a problem? Am I going to have to write vampire erotica or fantasy, et cetera? And my agent said, you definitely shouldn't write those. And not, if she thought that I could write a good vampire erotica, she would 100% tell me to write that, just to be clear, because agents love nothing more than to make big deals and lots of money. But because she knows that I would be just terrible at it and humiliate myself, so instead she said that I needed to write a book that, I wanted to write. But then after that, she said, and this was ominous because my agent is not the type to kind of mince words. She said it better be really good. She said it actually better be better than my first 2 books because, now I had a record and a sales record, essentially sales track, and I was starting at a disadvantage probably in the industry. So after having that conversation, I kind of thought about what I wanted to do, and at the same time, I think I was kind of going through a personal meltdown. It was a very slow rolling kind of meltdown. I'm probably still kind of going through it, but it's really, what am I gonna do with my life? I guess that's all there is. What is it? Am I happy? I think all those kind of generic questions that come creeping up on you in the middle of the night or during the day. I thought about if I should quit my job. And after a while, I decided to keep my job or stay at my job, my full-time job, partially to kind of remove that pressure of me needing to kind of make a commercial living out of it and allow myself to go back to why I wanted to write a book in the first place. Okay, so why did I want to write a book? I think most authors get into writing because at the heart of it, we love books, we love reading books. But then sometimes along the way, especially after your career starts, sometimes those ambitions get mixed up. You decide you need to make an actual living, so you need to be more, commercially successful, or you want to be famous, or you have a dream that you're going to get a movie deal, so you start thinking about what would look good on screen, or you look at what's trendy in the market, and then you say, well, I could do a version of that, and then you go down that path. And what I realized was what I wanted to do was write a book that I myself would read. At the heart of it, I wanted to take all of my confusion about how to find meaning in life and feelings about how much we as humans all want to connect to each other, but yet so often don't. How much waste there is sometimes in the world because we have so much opportunity to connect if only we would just try a little bit, or not follow certain societal norms, or open ourselves up to a little bit of vulnerability or embarrassment. I wanted to write a book about all of that and connection and love. So I wrote that. I worked on it for about 18 months, and then I sent it to my agent, and she messaged me when she had read it, which takes forever. And she said, okay, let's set up a call. And I looked forward to that call all week because I think, you might know, you fight so hard to get your agent's attention. You just want them to pay attention to you. So, we get on the call and she says, hey, this is a good book. And I feel such relief when she says that. However, she then says, hey, I'm wondering if we go out, to submission for publishers under a pseudonym. And it takes a second for this to land. And I ask her, why a pseudonym? Why a fake name? And she kind of explains it in the way that if you were telling a friend who's, starting to online date, if you're hey, maybe you should online date, maybe it's better if you don't show your face on your profile. It's better if the other party gets to know your personality first, and then you can show them what you look like, and then hopefully they'll, really like you by then. So, she explains it, and I absorb that, and I say, okay, I'm gonna do it, but what if it still doesn't sell? And my agent says, yeah, that's going to be a big problem for you because at this point we would have already tried everything. So we do it, and we do it anyway. And almost immediately, the pseudonym doesn't work because my agent and I don't understand metadata. And one of the editors it goes to does. So she immediately sees that it came from like the Microsoft Word account of Kathy Wang. And so at that point, there was already some editor interest, but at that point, I think like half of them drop out of the kind of the process, and it hurts my feelings a little bit. I actually also just think that's like part of life, right? And it's part of kind of your journey, right? Like you have like you live with all the consequences of everything that you did up to that point. And so but at the end, the book still goes to auction. It's a much smaller one than my first, but it finds a home with an imprint that I'm so happy to be with, which is Scribner. And now we are here. I was lucky in the end, but I'm so aware that there are so many ways that it could not or may not have gone that way. And that, a lot of the times, or, some of the times when it works out, it's merit, but every single time there is luck involved. And so I just feel so fortunate to be here with all of you today. So thank you so much for being here and connecting with me and for being a part of something that has meant so much to me.
Thank you for sharing that and that background. Excuse me while I really, really quickly rewrite every question I was going to ask you. My God.
Is it oversharing?
No, not at all. Because I think people truly don't know these things, like what happens behind the scenes in publishing. People know it takes a lot of work to write a book and to get a book published, but I think, there's this kind of assumption of like, well, if you got one, you're good. Like, if you've published one, smooth sailing from here. So I think it really means a lot to have that journey and that honesty of like, well, it's not just that. You got to get through that door like several times.
I think industry, like many industries, can be brutal, right? Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to be, and plus I think people are like, generally, I think I get a lot of questions about kind of the business of the book side. So hopefully it was okay.
Okay, can I still make you read the first paragraph?
Yes, sure.
Because if you don't, I will.
Okay.
And I think it's better coming from you.
Okay. So this is just the first paragraph of the novel. And it is, Joan Liang's life in America began in Palo Alto, where she lived in the attic of a 2-story home on Azalea Street. Joan did chores for the widow who owned the house in exchange for reduced rent. She never could have afforded such a nice neighborhood otherwise. She lived in that attic until she was married, and she was married for only 6 weeks before she stabbed her husband. Joan was 25 and had lived in the United States for 2 years. The year was 1975.
My notes just say that exclamation point, opening exclamation point, paragraph exclamation point. Was that always the entry point to this novel?
Yes, I think I started this with that first paragraph. The version of it. Yeah, I think that was always.
That was always how we were going to meet Joan.
Yes, I think so.
Can you give us a little intro to Joan, other than, now we know she stabbed her husband.
So the novel, I think, really follows her on her life arc. It's kind of a almost like traditional novel in that you follow a character over the course of their life. I think Joan is a very practical person. She's someone who I don't think does a lot of necessarily introspection. She's literally just trying to survive, and she just moves to the next step, to the next step, to the next step. So sometimes I describe it as like an Asian American Olive Kitteridge or World According to Garp in terms of how I approached kind of that character. And I would say that she's very much just a very practical person.
She arrives on the page within that paragraph so fully formed. Like, we know everything we need to know about Joan from that one paragraph, which does not detract from how great it is to read about her for about 300 pages, because once you know her, you're on board with it. Can you tell us about developing this character and how you developed the scope of this book?
So I would say, she's just a character. I know I hate this answer because it's such like a cop-out answer, but I think she just kind of appeared in my head. So it's I would say that my mom has been divorced twice, which she would die if she knew I was talking about this right now because she hates talking about it. But she was married to my dad for many years. And the way I kind of started it too was I was like, what if she didn't stay married to my dad? What if she got divorced from him right away? And then had that life. And so that is kind of, in terms of the events of her life, how I approached the arc of it. But the personality, I probably combined like 10 different, probably women that I know in my life in some aspect or another.
So we get her entire life pretty much throughout this book. So I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about structuring this book. And now I'm also like curious about structuring this book in the wake of like what you're going through with the past two books, like how that impacted putting this book together, and coming up with the structure that you have.
I just really wanted, my first two books were really, so when I wrote my first two books, I'd never taken a writing course or anything. I just kind of, they were both third person, and each chapter was a different character. And it was just, for me, it was like very easy, because like you just write a character and then you switch to the next character and then you do that. And then, but I actually, I like my first two books, but I would say honestly, I never thought about them from the point of view of a reader. Like I never really thought about what the reader's experience would be like leaving that chapter and then like not coming back to that character for many chapters. And this book was the first one where I really thought about what it was like as a reader. And as a reader myself, like I generally like to kind of follow, or at least feel like I'm on a path, like the same kind of path throughout. Like I don't necessarily always like to be jolted out. Often, sometimes I do, but sometimes I don't. And so with this, then the structure of it was really, I thought back to kind of the novels that I liked growing up, and a lot of them were those kind of where you follow one voice at least throughout, and that's kind of what I try to do with this book.
Because we do have like an omniscient narrator where we're very close to Joan, but sometimes we break out of Joan and into other characters, members of her family, friends. So how did you navigate that? Like when you chose to let's stay with Joan, this is Joan's story, versus when you broke out and let us see like a little bit of other people seeing Joan.
I don't want to put her on the spot, but I think like a really good example of this is Bel Canto. So, I remember, I read that book as a reader, like way before I ever was a writer, and I loved it. But then later I was like, that's like quite hard to do. Like, at least for me, like the omniscient, like when you pop in and out, and so later when I was a writer, I was like, that's a very good example of it. So I was like, I just need to think about, I don't know, it was just kind of like I want to channel that kind of flow in a way that you did so well in that book. So.
Because covering the scope of like a person's full life, you could have ended up with an 800-page novel. So how did you choose like what to give us, what to take away? Because I think that's part of the beauty of this novel, is that you are so strategic in terms of when to show us moments of her life, when to withhold from us. Like there are some points where like there are big pivotal moments and we're like, oh my gosh, we're going to see it. And then you just pull away. And it's so much better for that because you leave this empty space. So I'm curious just in like the process of crafting this novel, like how did you choose those moments of when to zoom in, when to zoom out, when to just kind of like step away and let us breathe?
So I always write, or I've written my last 3 novels the same way. I write, I would say like 150,000 words, and then I cut down. And then I rewrite out to 150,000 words, and then I cut back down. And then I just keep doing that at least like 7, 8 times over and over again.
Do you chuck it each time?
Yeah, I chuck it. And then I like try to build it back out. And then, but then I have to send it to my agent under 100,000 words, because there's no way she's gonna throw it straight in the trash if she sees even the word count at over 100,000. Like they just, I think publishers don't like, at least for me, they don't like a longer word count. So I get it back down one final time to under 100. So I think through that, I try to like bring it down to everything that I think is absolutely necessary. And then, your agent, your editor is going to be like, throw all this other stuff away too. Like so I don't know if I necessarily am good at going like only picking the good parts. It's just I can only write a ton and then find the parts that I think are crucial.
I'm the opposite.
Oh, really?
I underdraft. I like it's pulling teeth. Like if to get to like 80,000, which I'm trying to think in page count for reference what that is.
It's like 400 words per page or something like 350. Okay, yeah, or 250. Yeah.
So did you, like, when you say you chucked it, you didn't, like, so there are 7 versions of this novel, and at no point did you go, like, full magpie, and you're like, but what if I just saved that one part?
I don't chuck the whole novel. I take everything that I delete out, and I put it in a file that I call maybe. And always go straight to the garbage. I never go back to it. But I put it in there so I don't feel like I'm deleting anything forever. It's like a psychological thing.
Understandable.
For you. Yeah, and so...
So how did the structure of the novel change over those 7 different drafts?
I
How did Joan change over those 7 different drafts?
I don't feel like Joan changed. I think the structure was always her life from the beginning to the end. I think that for a moment, my editor, because she was a little nervous about having just such a traditional novel. It's like it's very kind of traditional. It's not, she was like, should we try a dual timeline or like a cut, where when like you read a book and it's like someone dies and then it goes like, 1 year ago or something. Like she was like, should we try
Record
that?
scratch. How did we get
Yeah,
here?
how do we get there? Yeah. She would kind of brought it up, but we never, and plus I don't know, I didn't feel like I could, my heart wasn't in it, I guess, to do it that way. And so I was just like, I want to keep it the structure.
Because this is such a like close and intimate novel with this woman's life. How was it going from like your previous novel, which was like spy narratives, like tech industry? How is that shifting from like writing that to going into this like multiple drafts, but just so close to one person's life?
I think it was fine. Like, I wrote my second book was out in the tech industry because that's also where I work. And I mean, I just realized after a while, I was like, I don't think people have had enough about tech. Like I work in it. I've had enough of it. And like, I myself had a lot of fatigue, I think, from it, in a way. And it also became too difficult for me to parodize. Like, I mean, it defies parody, yet I can't write like a sincere book about like Elon Musk, right? So you only have, so I was like, I want to go back to kind of something that I feel like I personally wanted. And so it wasn't that difficult for me to want to do, but it was harder for me to work on, I think, because I had just always been so used to being able to switch characters chapter by chapter, which is an easier way, I think, to keep the reader's attention, right? When every chapter just ends and you flip to a new character, that does kind of keep the reader's attention in a way, like it's a natural break point. And that allows you to jump time more easily, if that makes sense.
Were there any points where you tried to structure this with the other characters? And can you tell us a little bit about some of the other people in Joan's orbit?
So that was a huge point of contention. I think actually some editors that like were interested in the book actually wanted to get rid of all the other characters because it does pop into some other characters' heads. And then some wanted to get rid of them until like the last chapter because it's like kind of a mic drop and then and et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. I think for me, I like to write many characters. It's definitely a bad habit of mine. So because I had 2 different editors, they were both like, you like to write a lot of little random characters and like, put little storylines for them. So I think I got to keep the ones that my editor agreed to keep, and then I was like, yeah, you have a good point. Like, we can get rid of. So that's it was honestly through process of elimination. I just have a certain affinity, I think, to certain ones.
Well, it works so beautifully here because we don't we see Joan, but we see Joan through other people seeing Joan. And we get this kind of rippling effect of like every choice she makes when we have that shift into another character's perspective. We see the impact of those choices. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the people in Joan's life, connections. Who else is inhabiting this book, and give us a little bit more about Joan and the book.
You follow her adult children, and I think for me, I have a hard time writing a book without writing about parents. Like, I'm very interested in people's parents. So I just, so in this book, she's the parent, right, really, and you follow, so you see her kids. But it's hard for me sometimes. Like, I'll read a book and I love it, but I want to know about the character's parents sometimes. It's like such a huge part of who you are. So you have her 2 kids in it. You have her lawyer. You have her husbands. She has multiple husbands. And I think I once read this piece of advice about writing a book, which is that every single character should be one that an actor would be excited to play. As in, like, no, not even, like, even a very small character should not be flat. Like, there should be something about every single one that has some level of complexity to it. And so that's something that I always remember when writing it. Like, even when I'm just like, this is her, I don't know, chiropractor or something, I'm like, okay, like, it has to have some, if I'm gonna put this person in a book, there has to be something more about it and like who they are in it.
I absolutely felt that because it is a lot of juggling of characters, but at no point did I feel like I was losing their names and their personalities because they felt so alive on the page. Can I make you talk about Misty? Can you tell us a little bit about Misty? She's one of my favorite characters.
Misty? Oh, it's so cool. Okay. Misty is Joan's husband's little sister. She is just That's so interesting that I mean, I love her too, but I love all the characters. She's kind of like, she's the younger sister. I'm always really interested too in those families that have like a few siblings around the same age, and then like one sibling who's like 15 years younger. Do you know what I mean? And so like, I just think it's so interesting. And if I meet someone like that, I'll ask them like all kinds of questions. So Misty is that sibling. Like, you know, her husband has a bunch of siblings around his age, and then he has one that's like much younger around. And Joan's husband, Bill, is, when they get married, he's 51 and she's 25. He's a lot older than her, and Misty is closer to her age. She's kind of like the mess up of the family. I don't want to give spoilers, but you know, they do get connected in a way later that's a little bit unexpected maybe. And I just wanted to write, I think, just what I imagined that younger sibling might be like. I think that was like how I saw her in her head was always as the very young sibling of a large family.
It's also like the train wreck of the family.
Oh, train wreck.
I say this lovingly. I adored reading her, but I'm like, oh yes, she is the train wreck of this family. Look at her go.
So, I like train wrecks. Yeah, they're good. Yeah,
The other part of this family, not an official family member, but the house. There's a very, very important house in this book. Could you talk a little bit about the Falling House?
So there's a big house in the book. It's called Falling House, which Joan lives in. Her wealthy husband, you know, his father has it built by an architect, and it's a very kind of, it's a character in the book. So actually, like originally they didn't like this title, so Falling House was like an idea for the title of this book. It's, you know, an architectural marvel. It's designed by a famous architect. There's just a bunch of, you know, really special details about it in the house. It's kind of one of those like famous houses. And I actually I like to write fancy houses. Who does not like to go on Zillow and look at houses? So there was a little bit of wish fulfillment in that. But actually, my father was a structural engineer, and he built one of the houses that we lived in. It was on stilts in the hills. And in the Loma Prieta earthquake, I think, the one that was like in 1989, I was a kid, our house actually fell over. And so it kind of, because like, it was on stilts, and my mom was like, that was one of the, I mean, it's not, she divorced him for all kinds of other reasons, but she says that that's one of the main reasons she divorced him, was because he could not even build a house that, like, he was like, you know, he could have killed us because he can't even build a proper house. So that was, and so it fell over. And she always said, well, because the house he built like fell over. So I always had in my head, I was like, I want to write like kind of like a falling house in it. And so, but she would murder me if I actually wrote that on the page. So I ended up just using the name Falling House and kind of imagining, you know, a nice version of that house. Because I think my dad had big dreams of the kind of house that he was building, but it just turned out very strange. And it was not structurally sound. So, and so, yeah.
You're the structural engineer.
Yeah.
Because I agree with you, like the house does feel to me like a character, which I love novels where the house feels like a character. Shout out Dutch House. And I think houses are also such an interesting like museum to self almost, or like this story that a family is trying to tell the world about themselves. And I think you do such a beautiful job of the way that this family is trying to tell a story about themselves and then sort of puncturing holes into that story throughout.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm in the Bay Area, and houses are a big problem in the Bay Area. Like, they're very expensive, and so they're like a main character in our lives. Like, I don't know what the real estate market is like in Nashville, but I mean, houses are keeping, I would say, 50% of marriages together in the Bay Area, because it's like, how are you going to buy another house? Like, it's like it's a major problem. So I think for so many people too, it's like I hear so often, like, I could have such a nice life here if only I had the house thing taken care of. But you can't get that taken care of because it's like so expensive, and so I just think it dominates our minds in a way that I wonder if is it like that in other, you know, because I talk to my friends in other areas and they're just like, okay, like, yeah, I'm gonna buy a house, and it's not like that in the Bay, you know, unless you're part of like the very, very top. It's just a constant source of stress and just a character and how you live.
I mean, I think it speaks to like the country right now. I mean, there's entire generations being locked out of home ownership. Like that exactly. Used to be held as our standard for like, no, you're doing good, you can buy a house. And now we have generations of people who cannot afford that. And that is, you know, it is very much a thing that we measure success by. So Falling House was a potential title for this book. How did you land on the title that was it always titled The Satisfaction Café?
I always wanted The Satisfaction Café. I just am very attached to it. It is the title that I went out with. So usually when your agent will take out your book with a title. So usually you'll have your title. then your agent might be like, this title is not good. And then they'll change it. And then the publisher will buy it and they'll be like, this title is not good either. And then they'll change it again. Just for example, like my first book, I had titled A Man of Means. And immediately they were like, we can't put man in the title because women won't read, won't read it. So then that got changed. Like, that's how.
Like that major flop, A Man Called Ova.
Yeah, like just things like that, And so that's just an example. But for this one, they wanted to change it. I think, so Falling House was one of the contenders. There was a bunch of others that they wanted. They really wanted to change it. And like, I think as an author, you always have to kind of dole out how many fits you're going to have. Like, you have fits about all kinds of stuff. And so this was where I used my fit. And I think they still wouldn't have done it, except, I'm just going to be honest here because it's a small group and I was honest earlier. I think that they had purchased a book recently around mine that they had spent like way more money on, and that they were having a lot of title problems with that book. So I think they just gave up and decided to try with that book. And then they let me have my title. And so that's kind of how I got to keep it.
Because I was curious about whether or not there was any pushback to the title of the Satisfaction
Yes,
Café.
100%. Yes. Plus, like, it only appears, I would say, a third, like 2/3 into the novel. And so they were like, you're going to get eviscerated on Goodreads just for this. And I was like, I know. So that's another thing with the cafe.
But I don't think it's a spoiler. There is, in fact, a cafe.
There was a cafe.
Can you tell us about the actual Satisfaction Café?
Yeah, so I am very obsessed with host cafes in Japan. I don't know if any of you have heard about them, but there are these cafes that people visit in Japan for conversation or companionship. I would say that in Japan, they kind of approach more of like OnlyFans tangential, place a lot of the times. And so I always wanted to write one of those. Originally I was thinking about Japan, but I love like translated Japanese literature. And so I was like, I knew I was never going to be able to write as good of a book set in Japan as like some of my favorite authors there. So I was like, I'm going to set it in the United States. But I was like, how could that work? And so I was just like, I want to write a cafe where people can come and like have a bit of conversation when they are lonely. And I want a cafe where you can have a conversation with different types of people. Like sometimes someone very motherly, or someone that will criticize you a little bit or help you with your life, or someone that will tell you all the great things about you, or someone that will just listen to you talk on and on about a super boring story or about your breakup over and over again. And then you can also order all your favorite foods. I think that I've always wondered why billionaires don't create interesting third spaces too like this. Like, I feel like billionaires all do the same boring things. Like, they buy sports teams or they build yachts and they go into space. And I was always like, why don't they ever create like a place out of their dreams?
I'm holding my tongue so hard
like
right
a place
now.
out of their dreams.
I'm with you. There's so many other. Especially when
too.
you think of like turn of the century, which we're often getting compared to like the Gilded Age. Like, you have the creation of libraries.
Yes,
like that is
yes.
what billionaires were up to. Was libraries, museums, third spaces.
Yeah.
So I absolutely agree.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I was like, why not try to like imagine what someone would build if they didn't have to make money, or that wasn't their first goal. And
So was the Satisfaction Café like always part of the story when you like went into this novel? Was that always going to be something that Joan was going to be working towards?
yes, I always wanted to have a host cafe, and I was always going to be what she did. And that's a very hard part to kind of jam into the story, I think, in a way. Like, it's the part where, like, I think when you write a novel, you're like, I'm going to have this part in it. And, like, I think when you're earlier, at least for me earlier in my writing career, that part that you're going to have in it is some, like, elaborate revenge fantasy about someone that was mean to you. And then you're like, I'm going to write that into the book. And so and then they're going to read it. They're going to feel sorry. And then, but that part always has to go. Like, it doesn't fit. But this one, I was like, this was, like, the part that, like, I knew I had to have in the book. And so in a way, like, everything went towards it in the book.
Okay, can we talk a little bit about loneliness? Because I think you write very beautifully about loneliness, and I think it's a tricky subject to get into a book. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about, like, there's a lot of national dialogue going around that, like, we're more lonely than we've ever been. And part of that is third spaces, but could you talk about how loneliness works in this book and what drew you to that theme and how it ties into the Satisfaction Café?
I think this probably says more about me than anyone, but I mean, I think everyone's kind of lonely. I don't know. I think
Well, that's why it's so tricky, because we're never supposed to say it. We're
supposed to be
never
lonely.
supposed to acknowledge it. But then we pick up a book like this, and it's like, yeah, of course we're all lonely.
yes. Okay. So I feel lonely at times, and sometimes I just think it's crazy because I wish I could just talk to someone else, but then you talk to someone else sometimes and they're like, what's wrong with you? And so I wanted to just write something where the person tries harder to get past that. Like sometimes I'll be driving on the street. I don't know why this gets me, but anytime someone else is walking by themselves on the street and it's a hot day, like I just want to pull over and talk to them. And I think that honestly, if I did that, like that person would be like, I'm not lonely. Like I have a very full life. Like what's wrong with you? Because like you just, and I think that's true. Like I think I am lonely, and that's probably why I had to write this book, right? Because it's just I had all these feelings about it, and I just felt like it was so sad at times that there were so many people out there that were so interesting and amazing, and I would never get to know them, And like sometimes I'll have like a really bad day at the airport too, where like someone is rude, and then I'll be like rude back. And then later I feel so awash in regret. Like I'm like, I don't know, like why wasn't I nicer? Like why couldn't I just have said something to them and then learn something new? Like I was like, I don't know why I have any relationships that are not kind. Like it's such a waste, I think, of life to not be kind and try at least to find something in common with each other.
Yeah, well, I think this book is such a beautiful testament to vulnerability, and especially impacted by, sometimes viewing loneliness as a failure and being like, no, you have to fail. You have to like put yourself out there, be lonely. So I think you've done a really, really beautiful thing here. Just breaking through that like icy barrier of loneliness and connection and be like, no, you have to stumble. You have to fail for connection. It's worth it.
Yeah, I think it's worth it. Yeah.
So on that note, connections, does anybody want to ask a question?
I especially appreciated what you said at the very beginning, because that just seems so open, vulnerable. And for me, not being in your field, that was very enlightening, eye-opening about the publishing world. So I kind of felt like the curtain got pulled back. So I appreciate that. But my question was, given how you set that scene of what was going on prior to this book, how did you get in the headspace, the mental space, to not let that pressure disrupt the creative process? I mean, you did say one thing, you kept your other job, and that took some pressure off. But was there any particular mindset you had or something you told yourself that sort of freed you up to not be embroiled in that pressure?
So thank you so much for your kind comments. And just to repeat the question, it's about like how I wrote the third book under kind of so much pressure of like the preceding failures. I would say that I think something that people say all the time about writing books is like, no one is waiting for your book. So they say that all the time to writers, because I interpret that as like, no one's asking, like, in the movies where the agent's calling them and being like, where's your next book? Or your editor. I mean, I think maybe that does it happen for you, maybe, but it does not happen for most. Like, no one's walking around being like, where's that next book coming out from Kathy Wang? So if you want another book out, like, it just has to come, I think, from, this sounds so corny, but your heart. And I also just interpret that to be like, no one has the right to be published, at least by like a big five publisher. No one has, like, everyone has the right to write a book and to put it out with the world in some way, but no one has the right to have it published the way that they might imagine it to be published. And so I kind of let it go, and like I do have a full-time job, and so I was just kind of like, I can just be this. Like, I will have written 2 books and I'll just be this, and I do keep like the process very close to my chest. Like, I don't talk about it, so I do have a hard time. Like, I admire it so much, but I'm not the kind of person who can be like, week 2 and my book is still out for submission and I'm very sad because things aren't happening well. Like, I'm not. I'll just suffer in silence like for the rest of my life. So I think that's just how I handle it. Yeah. Thank you.
If you did not have alone time in your life, how would you find time to write with a career and everything? And like, when you wake up in the morning, what are you thinking about?
I'm very much a what they call button chair author, or is it button chair, like hours of the button chair, which is like when I'm writing a book, I write 1,000 words a day, I have to. And if the next day I have to go to because I have 2 kids, if I have to go to a birthday party or do a birthday party, I will write 2,000 words the day before. I'm neurotic about it, and a lot of times they're crap, they're not going to be good. But I have to write that every day if I'm writing a book. Otherwise, I don't have the momentum either. I'll lose it. I can't be precious about it because so that's how I get through it. I do. They're a little older. They're 8 and 10 now, so older. And I'm not doing a very good job at work, just in between us. So in between this group here. So yeah. So
I loved it. I just absolutely loved it. And thank you, Ann Patchett and Parnassus, for connecting all of us in this way to read amazing books. It's the book I wanted to read. You had so many themes in there that are contemporary and so just right on for me, talking about families, complexities with death, generational wealth, things in our culture that people don't talk about, but people wanting to be seen and heard. And I thought you just did an amazing job, so thank you.
Thank you. That's really kind of you. That means everything to me.
I have so many questions. I don't even know where to start. Somebody said to me recently that she had come to an event years ago with her husband, and her husband was like, "Who is that megalomaniac woman in the front row who wouldn't stop asking questions? Why didn't someone try to shut her down?" And they were like, "'Cause she owns the store." That's right. So were the first 2 books a failure, or were the first 2 books only a failure because you didn't pay back the advance? Because if they got a Book of the Month hit and a Costco hit, it's really hard for me to understand how these 2 books registered as failures.
I think I'm going to be, so I'll be fair to myself. I don't know if they were failures, but I don't think that they were, I just don't think it gave me any kind of boost at all. And I also think, because I don't have an MFA and I didn't go through those programs, I never thought of myself as a literary writer, but my agent at the end was like, I actually think you're literary, and we kind of did you a disservice, afterwards, by not disservice, but she was like, you haven't been marketed in that way. And so by that front, it just hasn't worked out that way. And we need to put you in this kind of, we want to try to put you in this category or genre. And so I think by that standard maybe as well, so, but I think, yeah, you're fair. I will say that for Costco, just for some publishing knowledge. So Costco, they used to have book sections in Costco. They don't anymore, which is sad, but they had picked it for their book club, which has a sticker on it. And it usually, that usually sells a lot of units alone because people go through Costco. However, Costco, someone messed up in the warehouse and they did not put a sticker on it. And so, that was it was a bunch of little events like that, which I don't know. So I actually don't know how much, but I don't think it wasn't a blowout but I know it happens all the time in publishing. So I felt very guilty, and then they were like, it's okay, it happens a lot. So.
Okay, and talk about your relationship with your mother and your writing.
Okay. With my mom? Yeah. My mom really doesn't like that. I'm very close with my mom. I love my mom. She's wonderful. I wrote a whole Wall Street Journal article that came out for the press for this book about my mom. But my mom does not like that I'm a writer. It is very upsetting to her, actually. And she, so if you go to her house, and I say this not to be woe is me, it's just to present how complicated relationships can be, because I love her and we have a great close relationship in many ways, but she doesn't have my books in her house. She thinks it's a very indulgent thing that I do. And she thinks that if I didn't, because I had gone to business school and everything, she thinks that if I didn't write books, I would just have a much better career full time. And so I'm always, I think, wanting her approval as well. And so for every book I really try, but she's not having it. She's like an Asian mom. She's not happy about it. So I don't know if that's more than you thought or something, but that's my relationship with my mom.
Have you ever met Kathy Wang?
No, but does she have a very difficult mom?
It's the same story. I
Okay.
mean, it's just
Oh.
wild.
Okay,
The
that's
book
okay.
Chemistry,
Yes,
which
I
I
love her. She's a great
love. Yeah,
author.
she's a
Yeah.
fantastic author. But the same
Oh, really?
thing with her mom.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. They're difficult. And like the journal, okay, I'm going to overshare with you guys, but the journal article, my mom reads the Wall Street Journal every day. She's read it for decades. And so for this book, I told the publicity team, I was like, the publication I want most is the Wall Street Journal. And they're like, really? Like authors like don't usually say that. I was like, yes, I want the journal. And the journal, we got it and we wrote this piece, and then they wanted to send out a photographer to photograph me and my mom, and I was so happy about it. But then she sabotaged it last minute because she just didn't want to. I don't know. She was like, "Is it associated with your book?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So she just didn't do it. And then, but then so I had to give them an old picture of me with her. But now she's happy about it, right? Because her friends told her about it. And I know this sounds like I should not be saying all this, but I love my mom. Like she is in many ways my hero, but she's just a very complicated person. And so I'm going to interrupt you really quick. I do see a hand back there. Does she read your books? No, she doesn't. She won't read them. No, she doesn't read my books.
Only because you're oversharing.
Yes.
And I love
totally.
it.
I'll share. I will share with you.
Does it, in some ways, the fact that your mom doesn't read them, do you feel like that frees you up to explore certain relationships between mothers and daughters that you wouldn't be able to otherwise?
100%. Yeah, I think so. I feel very free. I mean, I feel free in general about it. Like, I think I read this quote once, and I think it was from John Franzen, and he said, like, whenever someone writes a book, there's always going to be blood on the floor. Like, if you want to write, like, a book that comes from the heart. So I think I've always remembered that there's always going to be something that you would normally not want to put on the page, maybe, or somewhere. And so, what's next? I'll maybe write another book. I don't know.
You just got me curious about
Yeah.
one thing you said in passing about, I think something to the extent of you thought about publishing in Japan, but it's hard there or something.
Oh,
I was just
no.
curious the difference.
Oh, no, I wanted to write a book set in Japan originally, but I love reading books in translation from Japanese authors, and I was just like, I will never do as good as a job as any of these authors about writing a book in Japan. I just, like, sometimes as an author, like, you read a book and you're like, maybe sometimes you're like, I can do that, or not you, I can do this, but you're like, I want to do this, and then you're just like, I think some of being an author is accepting your limitations. Like, just, I know I cannot do a good job at certain types of books. Like, they are amazing to read, but I would just be terrible at writing it. Like, when I read a Ben Lerner book, I don't know if you're, but like afterwards, I'm like, I kind of like go in autofiction mode, and it's awful. Like, I mean, no one, so it's accepting that you just can't do certain things well. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Because otherwise, I'm just going to say, Kathy, thank you so much. Lindsay, thank you. It's been wonderful, and we appreciate you. And the Satisfaction Café, I'm telling you, thank you for what you said, because it's different coming from someone in the audience than from us. It's a great book. Thank you for being here.
Thank
And
you so much for
congratulations.
coming.